Were you able to read the story?
I
The book?
was in the because I was like looking it up and I was like, I can't find it. But it was because it's a short story in a book.
A
And I just
compilation.
yeah. I was very perplexed at some of the things that they changed. But I can kind of see why, but at the same time, uh I don't normally read books but or react to them, but when I was reading I couldn't help but catch myself like jaw dropping or reacting to some of the things that were written.
Ever meet someone so different from you couldn't imagine ever being friends?
Mari Bach, yes, the exchange student from Dundee, South Africa.
You're the family?
Disney Channel presents a story about two kids from two different worlds who beat the odds.
Do you have any black friends at home, Mari?
They formed a friendship
I'm glad I stayed.
until prejudice threatened to tear them apart.
Pack your things. You won't be coming back.
Watch The Color of Friendship, a Disney Channel original movie.
Hello everyone, welcome to an episode of the Box Cutter, where this month it's Black History Month. Black History Month highlights many great figures and historical events throughout our history and highlights Africans and Blacks within our nation. This time we'll be highlighting the Disney Channel original movie, The Color of Friendship, starring Shadia Simmons. And with me today, I'm just so nervous. That's why I'm so and ah and all that stuff. Is author, director, activist, and person extraordinaire.
You're so sweet. Well, I'm a drama therapist.
Okay.
Right now, actually, I'm doing drama therapy with the cast and crew of a touring Broadway show. I'm a victims advocate, so thank you for that recognition. I work internationally and nationally with trafficked teens, domestic violence, PTSD, addiction, elder abuse, and on Indigenous reservations, cultural trauma. I am a filmmaker and a director, producer, screenwriter, and an author. But most importantly, I'm a mommy.
Historical figure based on the movie Miss Piper Dellums is with me. Piper, how are you?
I'm wonderful, Daniel. You are so precious. I'm so happy to be a part of this, and I'm happy that that story, that film, that book, and that experience was a foundational part of your growing up, a part of your journey. I can't wait to hear how it expanded who you are in the world.
Thank you. To give a quick summary before we delve into our conversation, The Color of Friendship was a movie released around the early 2000s that revolved around your life around 1977. That summer, that year, as you hosted an exchange student named Carrie in real life, but Mari in the movie, and how her life in South Africa and your life in America came to a head, and how you basically opened each other's eyes to different parts of the world and became better enriched through the experience of it all.
That's correct. That's correct. A convergence of souls during a very tempestuous time in society, which we see continues to ebb and flow. You know, we see these transitions, and I think it was about the bonding of hearts, the bonding of laughter, of friendships, of youth, of falling in love for the first time, of just being. And these are the things that are stripped away from young people when culture decides to put an imprint of separation or race or identity or other than and label what is no longer and should never be a property by which people find each other in this journey.
So, besides being based on your events in real life, you wrote a short story called Simunye.
In Zulu, that means we are one.
Yes. And what made you want to write? Like what led you to want to, pick up the pen and paper and just write about your experiences?
And write the story?
Yes.
Well, I would say most probably having the ability to taste, feel, touch, and see apartheid and the ending of apartheid up close and in person by moving to South Africa, to Johannesburg, with my husband and two daughters when they were 1.5 and 3 during that time of transition. Um, After living as the daughter of Congressman Ron Dellums, who authored the Comprehensive Sanctions Act to end apartheid, I understood the politics behind it. I could intellectualize the trauma, the pain behind the separation, behind the violence, behind the imprisonment, behind the racism. But it was very different to step out of the embracive, gifted childhood that I encountered, that I was blessed enough to be born into, and leave Malibu, California, and wind up in South Africa, walking through townships, through an AIDS pandemic, through a terror of the Afrikaans community, feeling that they were losing wealth, power, status, renting a home there that didn't just come with amenities, but came with a family that had been disjointed. Was more like slaves. They were introduced as easily as the washer and dryer, as simply a part of the setting. These were beautiful women who had tin plates hanging in a garage, the only plates that they were allowed to use for eating. They ate with their hands, not with utensils. They wore ripped shoes. They worked themselves to the bone. They were separated from husbands, from family, from their own children, though one had recently given birth. And they weren't taught to read or write. They were disallowed to go into public restaurants, into certain grocery stores, to the gym, to ride up front in certain vehicles, to have access to all of the hospitals. And although we were in this stunningly rich environment where we could go on safari and bear witness to some of the most extraordinary flora and fauna human eyes have ever seen, they had never gone on safari. They had never seen any of the animals that were birthed and reared on the land that was authorized for them and for their ancestry. They had never seen the oceans. They didn't watch television. It was just an extraordinarily painful experience to wake up to something that translates very differently on paper than it does when it is slapping you in all of the essential places of your being. There were giant billboards on the freeway that had lynch robes that had like red, almost like blood dripping from them. And the poster would say, "What a snap decision," and snap would be over the noose written in red. "What a snap decision, end Black crime." These were the billboards you would see while you were on the freeways. People had guns on their dashboards. You go to the gym or the grocery store and they would say, "Dismantle your weapon." So I stepped into that environment already holding in my heart the memories of Carrie, of having this sister, of having this a love dance, of having this friendship, of having this bond that had to end at the gates of the airport in Washington, D.C. in 1977, because I was disallowed under the apartheid regime to go to her country and to share in the experience of being an exchange student in her home. I was the ugly secret. Staying with my family was the ugly secret. And I did not have the cognitive ability to understand all of what that meant until we no longer had her in our lives, until we lost contact, until we lost her physically, and until I was able to hear the words of Nelson Mandela, see the dance and the celebration of the freedom, bear witness to poverty that was so extraordinary. It was almost unfathomable. And to be in that environment as an African-American from the West, and still have to feel the stigma of that bigotry. Going into restaurants where they would come over to the table. My husband was Jewish. They would come over to the table. If I would bring the women who became my sisters, who came with the home, who I told them, no, I clean up after my own husband and children. I cook for my own family, but we will become a family. We will locate your children. You will live with us, and we will assist you in learning how to navigate this new South Africa as a family and as a steady educated people. So I would bring those women, my sisters, to the restaurants with us, and they would come around and say, people are complaining of an odor coming over the table, so you have to leave. Or I would take my children to school who didn't really bear witness to being children of color. And I would have to ask them to please call me the au pair so that they wouldn't get kicked out of school, because they were kicked out of 2 schools, although they were preschools and kindergartens, simply by my appearing to pick them up, and they're screaming, "Mommy, mommy," and then we'd get a phone call that there just was not enough space for another American child, and we'd have to remove them from the school. Or my 3-year-old getting hit in the face with a massive rock by a young boy as young as she, maybe 4 years, 5 years old, who called her a effing kafir. And the final trauma that really made us want to leave South Africa was when my eldest daughter said to me after that experience, she said to me, I don't want to be an ugly Black like Rena, who was the woman that lived in our home. And my husband and I looked at her and said, "What are you saying? You are beautiful and you are Black." And she said, "No, I'm not ugly Black." And we said, "But you are Black." I said, "You're Black because mommy is Black, because grandma and grandpa are Black. Your father is Jewish, you are both, but you are considered African American in our society. You are Black." And she looked at me very seriously as a young girl, and she said, "Well, mommy, I hate you for making me Black." And I looked at my husband and said, "We got to get back to Cali." But there was something about that experience, about understanding on a cellular level where Carrie was reared, what was embedded, all that she saw, all that was the norm for her, the degradation of the human spirit of Black and brown and colored people, the lack of them having humanity, having human rights, having running water, sewerage, dignity, almost not being fully human. And I really understood what the fear and the terror in the ignorance of what she bore witness to moving into our home. And then I also recognized that Disney was walking on eggshells when they told the story, because they did not want my brothers to be older than I was. And my brothers are older than I am. They didn't want it because then it would conjure up for our own foundation of racism the truth that there was probably, some young innocent love forming in our home because they were young teens, and that is exactly the case. So Disney had to make it a little more innocent, a little less fearful for parents that were first introducing their children to the concepts of race and racism. So that's what inspired me to write the book from that perspective. And 9/11 had just happened. I was writing it and finishing it during 9/11. Sold it maybe a week after Ground Zero.
And all this experience that you experienced with your daughter, then your husband, this was all in the 90s.
Well, actually, closer to the late 90s, because my youngest was born in 92. My eldest was born in 92, my youngest in 94. So this was around 1997 or 98 when she said, "I hate you for making me Black." But we had been living in South Africa for a while.
And again, South Africa, this country region that's like, has cars and all that, for it to be still so raw is the word I choose. So raw with and confused of how to navigate now that Blacks were given the right to vote and Nelson Mandela was made president. It's good. I just can't help but scratch my head because, well, I guess because I've lived in America for all my life, it's like, this is all I know. Living in California, the suburbs of California,
Right.
It's eye-opening.
I actually don't think that we are navigating too differently that continent and the United States, because what makes it difficult really boils down, sadly, to greed. What makes
Mhm.
it difficult, what makes these systems stay in place, have almost little to do, it has little really to do with um, our race. It has more to do with having to control cultural language, the way people choose to love, the way people choose to worship, the way people choose to honor the environment. And it also has greatly to do with there needing to be a raping and an ownership to bring wealth. I mean, South Africa was diamonds, gold, platinum, petroleum, the big five, amethyst, you name it. And if this is no different than the founding of the Americas, how do you enslave Africans, bring them to this continent to work the land to bring greater wealth, or wipe off millions and millions of the indigenous of these lands, the original first peoples, because you wanted to kill a culture that was attached to environmental sound, attached to unification, hope, promise, and a very fluid and beautiful connected way to worship creator and creation. And even a people who believe in two-spirited people being very close to God, two-spirited people being people that could adopt children, that had extraordinary wisdom, because we were trying to translate a foundation of Christianity all over the world as well. So if you are going to translate Christianity without it being a true translation of the heart and spirit and beauty of the man, Yeshua, um, the Rabbi Jesus Christ, and it's going to be that you can't be this, you can't love this way, look this way, thou shalt not, above all of these things, you have to disenfranchise cultures, people, beliefs, full embrace of all of humanity. You have to break down love, and you have to own people. You have to own to become significant. So if you're going to rape a people and rape the land so you can be the great 1%, it happens there just like it's happening here. We're still raping our lands, our oceans, our people. We still have a system of slavery in terms of imprisonment of people of color. We're building walls. We have concentration camps here where we're holding what we're calling immigrants, the really people who are walking on their own original lands. It's really no different if you really think about it all over the world. And the hope is that we can one day come together in the very simple way that we did in the film, which is come together with heart, with laughter, with love for our differences, but love for one another. The film was called The Color of Friendship, but I produced a music video for Tata Prince and John Legend. It was called Love One Another, which I believe is sort of the evolutionary conversation of where we are now. And without that, those systems will always stay in place, whether they're governmental or whether they're in the hearts of men.
Your father, as you wrote in your story, once said, "The time for freedom is always."
Is
So,
always.
one of the subplots in the film I noticed was around that time too, was the imprisonment and the beating of Stephen Biko in South Africa, which I feel is very bold Disney to leave in. I know it's like when you're a kid, you don't really necessarily pick up on it because it's like dialogue, but going back as an adult, like hearing that, oh, the South African police beat this man who was for the rights of Black South Africans. And when he was killed, caused riots. It very much reminded me of the riots that happened back, back in the midst of 2020, police brutality again with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Just all these. It's like history. We're not learning from it. It's repeating itself, and it's saddening. It's disheartening.
Yeah, but you also have to take into account that with Stephen Biko, just like with what happened in 2020, these are not the isolated cases that caused the death of those individuals. Those individuals, or at least with Stephen Biko, this was during the Soweto uprising occurred. People were out protesting, trying to bear witness to the incarceration of the human spirit of people, of the raping of women, the raping of land, of racism, bigotry, torture, and systemic racism and trauma. But that was not an isolated case. That was more like that spark, that one spark that everyone bore witness to. But the fact of the matter is, behind the scenes, before the great spark, we know that there were way more Breonna Taylors, that there were hundreds of thousands of people of color that cried out from under either a lynch rope or a chain or a knee on their neck, I can't breathe, or from the poisoning of their lands or their food or starvation, poverty, the Emmett Tills. We have been screaming, I can't breathe, since we landed on these soils. The indigenous were screaming, I can't breathe, since colonization landed on these soils. And Stephen Biko was probably one of millions, hundreds of thousands. I do recall hearing a story prior to Stephen Biko's death that assisted in spawning the Broadway show and the play Serafina, which you may be familiar with. That was also about the uprising of the Soweto uprising. And Soweto was a township, very, very distressing, literally built almost on landfills, on trash. They weren't homes, they were metal and cardboard put together, disease, filthy water, no running water, no sewerage, no electricity. People would go hunting in Soweto. They called it hunting. Many of the, like what happened to Aubrey, this was what was happening in Soweto all of the time. Racist men and women would get in their cars in South Africa, and when it was dark, because there's no electricity in the townships, they would just open fire. They called it going hunting, kill whatever they hit. And those were human beings. The imprisoned, oftentimes, they would bury them in the dirt, just with their heads above the soil in that massive heat. They would urinate on them to humiliate them until they died. I mean, they were forms of torture that we even, the same forms of torture we heard about in the Holocaust, the things that Mengele and Hitler were putting the Jewish nation through. In Soweto, before Stephen Biko was killed, there was the South African national anthem, which was illegal to be sung at the time, that they, of course, remembered when Nelson Mandela was set free and elected, and the ANC brought back, which was called Nkosi Sikelel. And this was a song about a unified Africa, about the unification of all of humanity, environment, everything, this oneness, Africa as this oneness, but it was illegal to sing that song. So even before Stephen Biko was murdered, a group of children went out, led by their teacher, against the law to sing a song, children, little children, to sing a song of unification, freedom, and love. And that song was, Nkosi Sikelel Africa, Manu Pakaniso Tupelwayo.
Stefano
And this is the simplicity of this beauty. And the police drove out and shot them all dead, all of the children. So Stephen Biko was a part of that uprising, of that going out to say no more, of Mandela being arrested, of more lives than we can imagine being shot down, being tired, which is when they would put car tires on top of people and set them on fire so that it was a slow death, a melting of that vinyl into the body. The massive raping of women, which started the colored community in South Africa, all of these mixed race people who had no idea truly who their fathers were, no different than during the times of slavery and during times of Jim Crow. But yes, Stephen Biko was a face of that, as we have had many faces. The beautiful thing about it is that there are oftentimes one. It takes just that one where the whole world is bearing witness. So I'm so grateful to my father for forcing the world to bear witness 15 years before the world bore witness, before it was popular, before Oprah Winfrey and Barbra Streisand and everyone else was out there screaming free Mandela or had their arms open in this embrace of Mandela. My father was a voice crying in the wilderness by himself, saying to take down this system, and no one was listening. Ronald Reagan vetoed that bill twice, and he continued to fight. He continued to stand alone. These are the important voices. It's not just the voices of the celebrity or when something is popular to stand behind. It's the voices of those that are crying in the dark, calling in the wilderness. And that did not back down and would never back down, despite its popularity, because the human beings having freedoms and rights is our purpose in the earth. So I'm really grateful for my father recognizing very early on the divinity of humanity, our oneness, our purpose. Even when no one was out there, he would stand on the stairs of the Capitol or stand up in the halls of Congress, have Congress people walk out on him standing there alone with the few members of the Congressional Black Caucus standing by him, and the few liberals, the Lessa Khans and the Bella Abzogs and the Barbara Jordans and the Charlie Rangels and that group, standing by him when others would get up and walk out and make racist comments as a congressman. But he stood, and because he stood, he allowed us to have this exchange student in our home. And my mother really, truly, I must say, really was the heart of it all. There is no such thing as a great man without a great woman. And my mother is a great woman. So my father bounced all of his ideas and her ideas. They were an interweaving, like a dream catcher. They came together. My mother was doing just as much work in the world with Africare and all of these other organizations. And so when those two hearts and minds and purposes and destinies came together, there was no stopping this. And there was no stopping the destiny of having one white, privileged Afrikaner girl move into the home of a Black female attorney and a Black US congressman in Washington, D.C. before there was internet. So they didn't know what we looked like and we didn't know what she looked like. We're expecting an African Zulu, Xhosa, Sotho, Northern Sotho. She's expecting we're going to be a white family. And we come in under one roof and become one family and realize that she shed her blood, that red blood flowed as easily and as readily based on racism, bigotry, violence, and a silencing of the human heart and humanity. Her blood shed as quickly as the blood of the Africans were shedding there prior, and the blood of the Africans shed here in this earth. So yes, she did the martyrdom work, like many did here in the United States. Mississippi burning, you see, think about the young white men that were also found dead in the ditches, and people that marched with King, and people that, that gave all their families everything for human rights and freedoms, despite color, race, gender. So we're still doing the work, and there's still work to be done. But thank God for the Bikos, and thank God for those voices that cried in the wilderness and were finally heard across oceans, rivers, nations, and generations. So,
Yeah. And touching on identity, uh, going back to the book and your experience that you talked about, um, I can't help but relate to the same thing of where in your story at the beginning when you were going on a ski trip and you know how you wanted to disassociate yourself from being Black and your daughter wanting to disassociate herself from being Black as well. I kind of went through that same experience of I didn't disassociating myself as a Mexican because of the way I was treated with regards to growing up in a Hispanic community. They expect you to be a certain way and live in this small town forever and not get out of here, any of that stuff. And I was different, artistic and creative and not like all the other kids. And it just got to a point where it's like I don't want to see myself as Mexican because people that are being mistreating me are Mexicans. Why do I want to associate myself with those people? And so yeah, I'm sure it resonates with a lot of people who've read the story and the experience that you shared of that identity of I don't want to associate myself with what I am anymore, but I was fortunate enough to be stronger than the experiences that I went through. And every now and again I question whether or not I'm enough of my heritage, but at the same time, that shouldn't matter. I am what I am, and that's enough. I don't have to necessarily prove myself, and I'm sure, but I'm going off on a tangent. But
no, you're not. I understand, and I am following you with my heart wide open and my arms wrapped around you. It sounds to me like we someone had two different experiences, but that ride down the same road in terms of that. For me, growing up, I was growing up in a time in a very conservative area in Chevy Chase, Maryland, where my classmates, their parents were parents of the 70s, so they were a little bit woke. The parents had gone through, some of them had gone through the liberal 60s. They were finding their way, but the foundation of belief was the same. The neighborhoods were all white, the schools were all white, and the conversations were still a degrading. The first outing that we ever had as Black people and as a Black family growing up in an all-white community was the film Roots, where because there wasn't yet a compassion or an understanding, because our history books were not teaching the truth. And I don't mean just the history of here's where slavery starts, where slavery ends, but the breakdown of the human condition, the breakdown of the psyche, the spirit, the economic racism, things that aren't spoken about. What really truly happens to a human being when their rights, their body, their freedoms are stripped. The PTSD that's generational. And so I heard a lot of racist things coming out of the mouths of my friends. I remember auditioning for a play, and I was really into theater, into children's theater, ballet, all of that. Like you, I was unique. I was in the arts. And now you recognize that your uniqueness is your perfection, that your uniqueness is exactly what makes you stand out. That's what makes the Mandelas, the creatives, the visionaries of the world, to be ascended and to be ascended and standing alone, like my father, like you, like me. At the time, you want to fit in, because when you're young, you want to be a part of something, because we're still seeking and searching our own identities, right? And but once we get once we get out of that, but I wanted to be a part of the school theater. I wanted to be on the stage. I wanted the same embrace. So I remember learning all of the lines and learning all of the songs and auditioning for Snow White. And of course, I wanted the lead because I thought that I was a fine actress. I really didn't have an understanding about Snow White, even though they said her skin was as white as snow. We heard about all of that when you read the Disney book, but it didn't really connect it to race or culture. It was a character. So I remember auditioning, giving the biggest audition of my life. And I remember the drama teacher and one of the parents in the audience, like laughing. And then the drama teacher stopped me and she said, "Oh, Piper, you're auditioning for the Snow White character right now." And I said, "Yes, I am." And she said, she laughed and she said, "We're not doing Black Beauty. We're doing Snow White. You're supposed to be auditioning for the Wicked Witch," which was the role that I ended up getting. It really affected me, believe it or not. It really affected me. And I thought, wow, not even in make-believe, not even in make-believe in the fourth grade do I get to play a character without being mocked by adults. The same when we went off to Disneyland. We drove from DC to Florida. My mother, father, brothers, and I, one year. It was like 103 degrees. We were children. We wanted to go to the happiest place on earth. We wanted to meet Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck, and like every other child. And every time we would try to stop to go to a motel, my father would get out of the car and they would put on the no vacancy sign the moment they saw him get out of the car. And when we finally got almost there, my father needed a cup of coffee. So he sent my mother and my brother and I, Eric and I, into this little cafe to fetch a coffee for him. We go inside and we didn't realize, I guess it was a Klan cafe. And my father was in the car, thank God, in a tinted window in the sedan that we had as a family and as a political family. And the man behind the counter, my mother ordered a coffee. She kept pulling us close to her and saying, "Stay tight." So she understood. We didn't. The man behind the counter put a loogie in the cup, a big mucus loogie, spit in the cup, then slammed coffee on it, and then asked for money. My mother really nervously laid money on the counter, didn't take the coffee to usher us out. Before we can get near the door, 3 big white men stood up and said, "Where you going, boy?" to my 7-year-old brother. And my mother said, "Keep moving." My mother was very tiny, 5'1", at the time, probably 98 pounds, 100 pounds wet. And my mother said, "Keep moving." My father's 6'5". And then they started walking towards us. They thought we were alone. And the man said, "Don't you hear me talking to you, boy?" I said, my mother kicked open the door. The man said it one more time. My father heard, and my father came slowly standing out of the car. His voice sounded like the voice of God in a movie, like Morgan Freeman is God. And I remember his voice dropping 1,000 octaves, and he looked like he was 9 feet tall. And he said, "What you want with him?" And like that. And the men backed up and said, "Oh, we just were trying to see if he was." But I remember getting in the car, my mother putting us in, and my mother's hands just shaking. And my father going, "Is everyone okay? Is everyone okay?" And we finally made it to Disney World. When we got to Disney World, we stayed there because they allowed us to stay despite our race. But my father showed up in a tank top and shorts, like all of the other white fathers. It was 1970. But they wouldn't let my dad in. 1971. He was a congressman. They wouldn't let him in because he had on a tank top and shorts. And so did all of the white patrons who were men. And they said, "It is offensive to a lot of the patrons. You have to cover up your arms and legs." So my father said, "No, we will never go to this park in Florida ever." We as children didn't understand, but I grew up later recognizing, oh, it really is a small world after all, especially if you're Black in America. So becoming a young teen, you want to hide from that. I went on that ski trip and these were all of my best friends. And, I just couldn't believe that my best friend's brother said, "Look at the coons walking in the parking lot." let's hit them with the car. And these were two young Black teens that looked like my brothers in their Izod Lacoste and their little preppy outfits in Maryland. It was like, oh my God. And then they all looked at me and said, oh, they said they're coons. They're coons in the, they come out at night. And then I remember my friend looking at me because I was in such shock. And she said, oh, don't worry, Piper. We don't think of you as being Black. For some reason at that time, at that young age, I felt safe because she said that. What a dangerous, horrifying place to be, where hiding from the violence of racism, you feel safer not being something that you are than standing up for who you are. But I hadn't found my voice yet. And in your situation, I understand also for the same reasons, but also because, like you said, there was a cultural diagram of how you were supposed to present, how you were supposed to be, with religiosity, all of those things in the world. So to be pushed outside for your own culture to say you're not a part of our dialogue is a very profound wound. But here we are in 2022, evolving as a spiritual species, recognizing that who we truly are has nothing to do with our race, our gender, our culture, that we are who we are and who we always were before we were named, before we were a certain age. We're rising into this higher consciousness and recognizing that you and I were made to be different on purpose, because you're called to have this voice on this podcast. We're called to have these unique voices in this generational time and season to help heal the world and bring the world back to its consciousness, which is colorless, genderless. It's all of that. It's to come back to love. So it's a good thing that we were pushed out onto the margins, because look how beautiful of a human being you are. Look how wonderful we are.
Thank you.
They're all jealous of us now. We're amazing. Because
everyone's amazing.
Everyone is amazing. So true.
But beyond that, another thing the movie presented, as well as in your story, the censorship that Carrie faced in South Africa. Maury Carrie, we'll just call her Carrie because, well, that was her name, in respect to her. That she wasn't allowed to see certain movies or TV shows or read certain books. And that kind of is paralleling, again, America, how some states are trying to ban quote unquote critical race theory.
Exactly.
And it's a thing of, at first I'm like, I get frustrated. When I was younger, I would get frustrated, like, why? And the older I get, the more I realize people do not want to feel embarrassed or stupid, even if they are wrong. And in this instance, in both instances, the reason why things are censored, the reason why people want to ban these critical race theories is because they don't want to be seen in a bad light. They don't want to look stupid. They don't want to feel embarrassed of their people, their history. But the sooner it humbling experiences lead to progression.
Also, when you expand a mind with education and truth, conversation, you can't control the educator. You can control people's minds, their beliefs. You can redefine the truth. You can have, what did Donald Trump and this whole group, they coined it alternative truth. Alternative facts. You can deceive, you can create the Holocaust with enough lies. So, of course, if you open people's minds in South Africa under apartheid to books about slavery, about human rights, Cry the Beloved Country, about the truth of the foundation of the nation, about bloodshed, about the raping and pillage of land and humanity, somebody's heart is going to be pricked. Somebody is going to become like Carrie. Somebody's going to say, what is this? It needs to stop. And that somebody is going to multiply into a multitude. So if you keep people ignorant, you can keep them controlled. And I believe this is also, yes, you're absolutely correct. People don't want to be embarrassed, but also people don't care. People like their power. They like the control. Right now, there is a huge fear. The world is changing. You are no longer white and right. The world is changing. People are bearing witness to the truth. Racism, like they call it the apocalypse. Well, if we take the word at its true definitive value, we are in the apocalypse, because apocalypse means to unveil. This is an unveiling. And we are falling in love with ourselves. We're falling in love with ourselves as Black, brown, red, yellow people. We're falling in love with ourselves no matter how we choose to serve, love, see, or define God, the universe, spirit. We're falling in love with ourselves no matter how we choose to love, LGBTQ+. We're falling in love with ourselves. We're falling in love with our beautiful uniqueness. And what once controlled us and said, hold on, you're not white, straight, and Christian. So you're not a part, it's the us and them. We're the us's, like Dr. Seuss with the stars upon ours. It made sense. This is the way they've controlled the world, but that's over. Now people are bearing witness to extraordinary ignorance, extraordinary racism. And what you're getting is a big love revolution happening, and an opening and an awakening, and then a huge, dark, fearful polarity, extreme happening on the other end, where people want to stack up on their guns and they want to go and kill everybody, and they want to believe this QAnon and all of this racism, and don't teach our children anything. And, but these are these two extremes, This is the wheat and tare growing up together. This is the light and the darkness, very little gray. And people are afraid of losing what they felt was control and power. Once they lose control and power, then what happens? You have to share. You have to share the wealth, share the jobs, share your heart, share faith, share your neighborhoods. You have to share the gift called life, the gift called the earth. You have to stop poisoning and polluting human minds and Pachamama, Gaia, and your children. And people don't want that to happen. They bore witness to what it feels like when Barack Obama was elected, and it terrified them. Hold on. You got this Black man and this Black woman and those two Black kids and a dog in the White House. He's never had an affair. There's no domestic violence. She's not an addict. The kids aren't addicts. Wait a minute, a beautiful, wonderful, honest, a happy, healthy family, and they're Black? Forget it. This is going to change an entire generation's mindset about the people we're trying to keep our knee on. This has to come to an end, and in rushes the Trump administration. All of this hatred, all of this bigotry, this stripping of human rights, the bashing of Blacks, the bashing of Latinos and Latinx community, the bashing of Asians, the calling a virus the China flu, the bashing of LGBTQ communities, a raping of the woman's right to choose, and a continual poisoning of the earth and the environment, our air, our water. So it's an extreme. It's like, it's the last fight that a wild animal has, when it's backed into a corner. But at some point, you're gonna, the cage is gonna be open. I'm praying that we bear witness to even those hearts cracking open. And I believe that all of us as Black, brown, red, yellow, LGBTQ, poor, we've all come really as ascended spiritual masters. We chose this journey at this time to be in this incarnation, because those that we look at as the power group are really the ones that are children in spirit. They need evolution. The way that they harm us, abuse us, is going to open up their hearts to compassion. And hopefully that compassion will lead to all of our oneness, for us seeing each other, from a heart perspective. So if we have to be the martyrs in order to awaken the human hearts, so be it. We're from ancient cultures. You're from indigenous cultures. We're from foundational cultures. We're from the truth. We're from the earth. and intellectualism can't control and can't define who and what we are and where we're going. Again, life is evolutionary and we're in an evolutionary process. So it's painful, it's laborious, like birthing a child. We're bleeding, we're ripping open, but something new is coming. And
Something beautiful that will take a collective effort from everyone to raise to be something beautiful. It's one of my sign-offs. It takes a village to raise something beautiful, which I do
absolutely
believe.
true.
Before we wrap up, I did want to touch on because it's a Disney movie based on short story. How did it come about that Disney just like wanted this? It seems very
You know, that was my mother and brother got into. I think it's because when you share the stories of your life experiences, and my mother, you know, she's a socialite out and about, and she met the incredible producer. She already knew Kevin Hooks and Robert Hooks and the Hooks family. I don't know how she met Paris, but it was Alan Sachs. And I think my mother had shared the stories through the years, just as a dinner party social anecdote of what it was like having these exchange students, because this was a really important part of our growing up. My mother being connected to this AFS program, and even my daughters went off and were exchange students. So I think the anecdote was such that people's mouths just fell agape, and then it becomes a conversation, spawns a conversation, and then that conversation goes into that would be an incredible book, that would make an incredible film, and then you know circumstances lead to the right person at the right time. So yeah, that's how that came about.
Yeah, and I just remember growing up that it would pass in February a lot because of Black History Month. But even before that, I remember in school, one of my teachers was like, "Oh, she loves the movie," showing it to her class and all that. And now, 10, 20 years later, it's like no one under the age of 18 or even 20 would even have the slightest idea of what film that is, even if you
Right.
show them a picture. And it's like,
Disney
I,
stopped making provocative films.
and this wasn't the only provocative film. There was other films like True Confession, which was a movie about twins, and one of the twins is autistic, and other films like that were very, even if they were fictional, were very, I guess the word is relatable. There were so many relatable films, and now it's a thing of it's not relatable. It's like, oh, tall, skinny, fair skinned,
Right.
flawless skin,
Again, keep them dumb. You can control the narrative.
actor, singer, whatever type of movies. And I just don't get it. And same thing with movies nowadays too. For kids, it's like nobody wants a G rating anymore. No one wants everyone wants a PG rating at least. It's like there are a lot of G rated movies that are very just as challenge, they challenge their viewers with the content that they have to show. And I don't understand. I try and wrap my head around it, but it's like people complain, but they still go out of their way to watch these things.
Right. I mean, we don't understand, and yet the truth is we overstand. We overstand why. Again, keep people from thinking, keep people from loving. You can control the narrative. We're dumbing down society, and certainly dumbing down young people.
Unfortunately.
And but you're a new generation. You have the opportunity to change that.
And I will do my best as an educator to.
You're already doing it.
and with my podcast to do that. Sometimes I might feel that I might not be doing enough, but again, it's not about comparing what I have. It's about doing what I'm doing and being proud of that I'm doing it.
Right on. Right
So, Piper, thank you so
Thank you
much
so much.
again. I
Thank
feel
you,
like
Amanda.
so accomplished to, like every guest that I have, so accomplished to have you on the show. It was so eye-opening. It was it was just so eye-opening. I just couldn't help but listen because it was I just felt like such a like a child listening to the elder of their village just talk about story then and just be in awe and wonder of the story that the elder has to tell of days of past. And thank you so much for
So welcome.
being transparent
So
and
appreciate
honest.
you.
So is there any projects or any last comments that you would like to share before we go?
No, well, I did just finish. I wrote a song that I turned into a short film called Pachamama. And another short film I did called About Love. And I don't know, I'll just send them over to you, Daniel. I don't know how to tell people where to go and watch them, but the Pachamama was important. I was really awakened, and I would say by the ancestors, I was awakened in the night, thinking about the universal call on women, the divine feminine. And so I wrote a song that allowed women all over the world in their voice, in the way that everyone in the world prays, and all of the different possibilities of form to deal with child brides, to deal with honor killings, genital mutilation, domestic violence, rape, and the raping of the earth. All areas where young women and girls and boys are seeking freedom and are unheard. And so I wrote it as a song and made a video. And then like the conversation you and I had about the evolution of the human spirit and what it's all about, our destiny, our purpose. I hear people say, what is my purpose? What is my call? And I think everyone's ultimate purpose is to awaken to higher consciousness, is to awaken to love. And whatever that looks like, it's to wake up. So I did a short film called About Love because I thought it was an important message.
So The Color of Friendship is streaming now on Disney Plus. And if you all have seen the movie and are interested in Piper's short story, Simunye, yes. And you are interested in Piper's short story of Simunye, it is in the book Open Your Eyes, Extraordinary Experiences in Faraway Places, which is available on Amazon through hardcover. So make sure to leave a comment. If you like what you hear, why not subscribe? I'm on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and SoundCloud at theboxcutterpodcast@gmail.com. Then
I'm at piperdellums.com.
and Piper at piperdellums.com, because it takes a village to raise something beautiful. In the words of Piper Dellums,
don't give up on this journey. It's all medicine. It's all sacred. When you feel broken, recognize that broken branches make the perfect nests. And once you've settled in that nest, don't forget to help others to fly.